Hey everybody, welcome back to this episode of Inazuma Tech. I'm your host, Adrian Johnson, and on today's episode, what I wanted to discuss is an inking implement that you can use that you may not even realize that you have in your very own home, and it's very inexpensive and pretty common. Now, let me ask you this. What do you do when you have to fill in, say, a large space on your comic board or an illustration that you're doing, and you have to fill it in with a large field of black ink? You have several options. You could go with a Sharpie, a big fat Sharpie marker, but the only thing with that is that while it can fill in a large area fairly quickly, that's very short term, just in terms of the archival quality of the art itself. This ink tends to fade over time and become, purplish or even brown. And so any line work that you use with that type of ink is going to turn that color, while other areas that you may use with like normal black ink, will stay that same color. So, it'll just give you this very odd mismatched effect. So you definitely don't want that, especially if you're thinking about selling your original art down the line. Another option too could be filling in with a pen nib. But the only thing with the pen nib is it will take you all day to fill in a large area. Very good for like small areas, but not so good for big, wide areas. So, that's something else. Now, you could also go with a brush. So I have a brush here, one of my good handy brushes. Even a big one at that. But the thing with the brush is that, a lot of times sable hair brushes, which is the one most preferred by most comic book illustrators and inkers, they can be fairly expensive per brush. We're talking like $25 upwards of $40 a brush, even more for some of the larger sizes. And so you don't want to necessarily ruin your brush, the fine point of the brush, by having just a high load of ink on it constantly, in terms of filling in a large area. Now you can use a brush, but, for how expensive they are and you wanting to keep it to a point, that may be something you want to think against. Now, that being said, back to my original point, the one thing that may help you, in terms of filling in those large areas and even more that you hadn't even considered is actually this. Your standard household cotton swabs. Yes, cotton swabs. The things that you put in your ear to clean your ear out, and you probably used in kindergarten to, color in, finger paints and stuff like that, all that good stuff. Yeah. You can use these to actually do some quite fairly common inking jobs without, resorting to some of your other tools. So therefore, they're inexpensive. You can get them at any drugstore, any department store. And then also it saves the cost in terms of, the other tools that you could use. You can use these instead and then save the quality of those other tools for your more finely detailed work within your art. So let's get started on how you can use these. Basically, fairly common is you want to fill in a large area. So I'm just going to quickly jot in, just rough out an area. Let's say you have your comic panel, okay? Comic panel right here. All right, so you got your borders. So you basically know, okay, I want this part in here to be filled in. At least this part. And we'll mark it with X's as comic book artists want to do to indicate the area of black that they want. So now, how do you start from there? All right, so we're ready to ink, and I know I need to fill in this area right in here. What's my first step? Well, the first step would be you have to get yourself some masking tape if you don't already have any. Fairly common. Again, you'll find it at most art supply stores or even hardware stores. Yep, fairly common. And just get your roll and then just put some down. And what you're going to do is you're going to want to outline outside of the the borders themselves, or exactly where you want the black to be placed. Now, we got our area masked off that we want to apply the cotton swab to. We want to make sure that we have everything masked off that we want to be covered in black, because this is going to be saturated. And so we're going to take a dip into the ink here. You know, and the great thing about cotton swab is once you dip it in the ink, it really becomes like, you know, a felt tip pen, almost like a felt tip marker, except, you know, this one lays down perfectly flat, you know, just in terms of the coverage that it does. And you're just gonna just go in and start filling it in. Nice even strokes if possible. That way you don't get a lot of streaking, because it's going to lay down very even. And the ink is so saturated into the cotton swab itself that it only takes like a couple of dips to keep the ink going. And once you lay it down, it's pretty much dry instantaneously, because it's not a thick load, and you're going more for coverage rather than saturation. Oh, we got that filled in here, and now don't throw it away just yet. Don't throw your nib, your cotton swab away just yet that you've used. Remember, you have another clean end that you can use also. So sometimes what I do is I actually take a scissors and clip it, so that way I can just still use the half that I'm currently inking with, and then I have another clean one ready to use like later on, you know, in my work day should I need it, you know, which most often you will. You'll definitely have to fill in more blacks, you know. All right, so I'm going to put that aside. All right, and we're going to remove the tape here. Now, as you can see, we have a perfectly ruled area of black that we want it filled in. All right, so let's see a practical application of the cotton swab on an actual comic book panel. Now, I've started working on this page here, and I've actually used the cotton swab previously to fill in some of these areas of heavy blacks. But I have a mostly virgin penciled panel here, and I started laying in some thin inks, you know, here in the corners. But, you know, these other black areas, you know, I kind of wanted to go ahead and see about filling in with the cotton swab as much as I can, you know, to the point where, you know, some of these more tighter areas I'll have to, you know, definitely get in with a tech pen or a nib, you know. But for right now, let's go ahead and show you the, like I said, the practical application of using, you know, a cotton swab on an actual panel. So we got nice juicy areas of black here, and we'll just go ahead and start filling it in. And even though at the earlier part of the video I mentioned about, you know, taping off your areas, which is, you know, kind of a good thing to do, you know, that's not always necessarily needed per se, you know, as long as you're very, very careful and steady with your strokes here. You know, you almost want to go stroke rather than stroke, stroke, stroke. You don't want to pet it. You want to do a confident stroke. That way the ink lays down flat and you're being expedient about putting the work in. Just kind of get it as close as you can, because you know that you're going to go back in and be more tight with your finer instruments. And sometimes I may actually put dabs, like if I see certain parts where it's too tight for me to do a big stroke, I'll just kind of, you know, play by ear, like, okay, I know I can at least put a dab right here, and then I can go back in with my smaller instruments and kind of flesh that out, so to speak. I mean, right now it definitely looks very patchwork, which it is, but it's patchwork that you know you're going to come back and finish filling in the rest of the quilt, so to speak, you know, once you lay everything in. All right, and so you can see how fairly quickly, just using the cotton swab, you can fill in, heavy areas of black and kind of start to see your page come together, in a very quick fashion. So I'm done with my swab for right now. And now comes the fun part. Get in there and start working this with a tighter instrument. So you can see how just already having those areas of black filled in, really helps to bring the page together quicker. And so now you have basically the treat of being able to just get in there with your thin line art and just bringing it on home. Yeah, that's starting to look real crispy right there. I like that. Yeah, all right. And I think I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my larger nib here while I'm thinking about it. There you go, my 102 nib. And then we're just going to go in here and start getting busy, getting to work. So that's probably a good stopping point as far as this particular lesson, inking with a cotton swab. And hey, I appreciate you guys joining me for this particular episode of Inazuma Tech. If you love what you've seen here, don't forget to see some of our other Inazuma Tech videos, as well as our other series here on the Inazuma Studios YouTube channel. And don't forget to check out our Patreon page, where for just $1 a month, you can support more videos and content coming from Inazuma Studios, fresh from us and straight to you. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This has been Inazuma Tech, and I'm Adrian Johnson.